It also sheds light on the historical depth of some of the issues that still apply in this sector today, and warns us against a sometimes too linear reading of the humanitarian past.
The reaction was thanks but no thanks to your solidarity and support, and access for international humanitarian organizations was extremely restricted. And on one hand, as someone working for MSF, of course, we're trying to regularly gain access to areas in crisis, areas in difficulty, and at the same time, intuitively, you can also say, well, it's actually quite a good thing that states, that countries prefer to take their own initiatives rather than depend on outsiders coming in to provide succor and relief. But it all comes back to this basic concept of sovereignty, which is linked to states, and especially how states have this sort of strange dualism where they've historically been shown to be the best way to protect a population, but of course they've simultaneously been the most effective way to commit atrocities. So you basically have these two extreme manifestations of state functions that sort of go side by side. And so how does that impact the humanitarian access that we try to achieve?
Today I will be talking about some of the research I've carried out as part of my PhD dissertation, where I investigated the linkage between environmental migration and political violence in sub-Saharan Africa. And so why should we care about this topic? So, I mean, discourses about the effect of climate change on migration and then internal security is prevalent in the public debate. And one striking feature of this of the debate is that it takes often the form of maximalist claim.
So in my work, I talk about humanitarian space very often, but what I mean with that is I have some sort of a conceptualization of it, which is the conceptual and the physical space of aid. So conceptual space is where the realm of formal abstractions, intangible norms, the practices and discourses are located. And the physical space represents the tactile space. So you have the cars, the walls, you have the people, you have the equipment, the planes, so to speak. And so these abstract delineations don't necessarily exist in isolation of each other, but I view them as coming together to generate this lived experience of the humanitarian space as a whole. In 2016, 158 attacks against aid workers resulted in 101 killed, 98 wounded, and 89 kidnapped. And so a bit broader, speaking from 1997 to 2015, over 2,500 incidences have affected over 5,000 aid workers and disproportionately killing 1,500 national and 195 international staff. And so physically, the withdrawal of aid workers behind concrete walls and the imposition of movement restrictions create a space for humanitarian action, and contact is monitored and controlled. The outside, the local population, is portrayed as dangerous and requires walls and razor wire to be kept out of the safe space that is the compound. So it prohibits walking around outside of the compound, and it does not engage the local population, which generates a very distinct environment where you have the aid workers versus the local population. So the visibility is reduced. Not only can the local population not look into the compound, but the aid workers themselves cannot look outside of the compound.
The 8 actors who operated in Jonglei, regardless of their different mandates, policies, and aspirations, found themselves in an actual situation of contact with one another, with the peacekeeping forces, and with a national army that was raging its military campaign. The only ones missing were the Murle. Also, MSF was left powerless in the centers of government of the South Sudanese state, which had previously been the outpost of the colonial state. It is also in this sense, I believe that, as Antonio Donini, who may tell us if he disagrees, I think that we can say, whether they like it or not, humanitarians are part of how the world is governed.
From our experience, from where we can come, do we look at it from an academic lens, do we look at it from a practitioner lens? We may have very different understandings of what the concept of humanitarian space means. It doesn't mean that one understanding is right or wrong, it's just to acknowledge that we have different understandings, and how do we act on those once we confront these different understandings in the field. And that's really something what the Humanitarian Encyclopedia project is all about, and look at different concepts and how these can be confronted.